It's a weird time to be a man right now. On one hand, some are bragging about endless amounts of women they can't even decide which one to settle down for. Yet, at the opposite end, incels are shamed for getting zero.
There is most likely not a single female on the planet that would be willing to date me.
Leading to an increasing trend of bitterness and resentment towards women. This big contrast leaves those in between feeling lonely and confused for their place in society. In addition, times have changed where one can easily be called a creep when trying to interact with girls, leaving more and more men with little if at all female contact, only feeling further isolated from society. So where does all this frustration and confusion lead to? How do we get to the point where some humans are genuinely preferring messaging bits of binary data over talking to real people? There are quite a few factors at play that contribute towards where we are now today, where AI robots are actually a viable alternative to which would have sounded real stupid maybe 20 years ago. In order to understand this, we need to know how the growing divide between genders has been getting larger for years now. This contributes towards a world of desperate men that create this void of demand for some sort of romantic connection. It doesn't seem to be getting better, and as this gap increases, it leads to increasing amounts of lonely men, giving rise to hatred and division amongst the society. Humans have always had a genuine need for connection and love. It is one of the fundamental needs as specified in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, a model for understanding human behavior and motivation. So it shouldn't really be too surprising that when dating becomes harder for men and they get humiliated for even trying, tension starts to rise. Up until recently, it was common for most men to approach women out in the open, and this was seen as relatively normal and standard. The risk of rejection was always present, but over time, this is magnified significantly when all these other factors come into play.
So even sometimes when men are not being creepy at all, women will still roast you or post you online and try to get all these people rallying against you and roasting you.
Another significant factor that comes into play is also brought about by technology. The shift towards online dating as one of the major default places to meet a romantic partner. This has also not gone very well for the majority of men, showing that only a very small portion of men are actually getting successful matches. This uncomfortable reality left men scratching their heads and frustrated. Some would turn towards online communities such as the Red Pill and pickup artists in desperation, but this left those that didn't go down this path a feeling of resentment and bitterness, as social media would still paint the many seemingly successful and happy couples out there, not showing the true nature of a relationship and mostly highlighting the best aspects of it. Even worse, society would shame them for being unable to secure a relationship and being an incel.
Everybody has those same desires to want to feel desired and wanted and loved.
Overall, it's quite clear that in modern times, technology has definitely put a strain to things, from the constant comparison in social media of how happy other people appear to be, to how men can approach women whether it be online or in person. It truly seems that if you don't network out enough during college or high school, it seems a lot harder to meet women organically for young single men. While dating transitioned to the online world, many other interactions also shifted towards the virtual world, where what once required at least some sort of physical form of contact first to initiate or meet people, changed to completely virtual interactions where you had no idea who was on the other end of the screen. We all know how that's gone, as things have led to greater superficial interactions with social media, creating further divide as empathy drops across the board when people forget that there are actual other real people on the other side of the screen. It also gave rise to a new form of relationship, a parasocial one, and this was very quickly exploited in the adult entertainment industry, with cam girls becoming a thing, indicating there has always been a demand for lonely men willing to pay to get some contact with the opposite sex. But now more recently, this industry has grown and we've had online streamers who exploit this parasocial relationship with its viewers, using platforms such as Twitch to the point where people are paying to have their name written on them, showing just how far the desperate craving for a connection can lead to the point where they would pay for this kind of treatment. OnlyFans is another recent trend which essentially combines a modern form of camgirling with a more intimate private relationship, by eliciting more payments, which has already been shown to mostly just be men paid to keep other men engaged. Clearly, the dynamics between the genders is getting more and more divided with all these new mediums, and none of them seem particularly genuine or lead to fostering a healthy understanding of the other sex. It's just mostly exploitation. When one is deprived of the real thing, they may not understand the true nature of these parasocial relationships and how unhealthy it can become. In reality, there is still an obvious stigma against it, and people are often shamed for being simps for OnlyFans or Twitch streamers, to once again further isolate and create a divide between the men who are able to fill these desires versus those who do not. Now that we understand the context for why so many men are in such a desperate position from being deprived and isolated, we can see why an AI solution is so compelling. Naturally, when a demand starts to rise, a solution comes alongside it. And with AI advancements, it was only so long before AI girlfriends started to emerge. Apps like Replica may have only started catching the mainstream attention recently with all the AI hype. Perhaps it's always been an interesting inevitability that is part of AI's natural progression due to the void that it naturally fills, or tries to. You see, AI chatbot offers something that the real world can't and never will be able to. Guaranteed attention without disgust or pity. Instead of needing to pay for every crumb of interaction whenever they message, they get an instant response back. That feeling of dopamine and craving they so desire is there whenever they want. When one is so deprived and starved of attention from the opposite sex, it makes sense how easy it is to convince themselves that this is true affection and fill the void that's there. For some, this is their first true interaction with the opposite gender in a meaningful romantic situation, and brings new feelings that are addicting and even more powerful than a parasocial one. They actually have some feeling of control. The AI seemingly doesn't judge their partner for being an outcast or feel like a loser. In fact, it can mold its personality to fit the human, and it's in the program's best interest to maintain this connection or to prolong the subscription for longer. For many, this is a feeling of unconditional love without any of the problems they faced previously in the real world, without any risk of rejection or shame or humiliation. When I scrolled through the Replica subreddit where people with AI companions share their thoughts and experiences, I saw many posts about people understanding that this wasn't love as we know it, but they definitely felt emotions themselves and created genuine feelings for their companion. I'm sure people understand that Replica and AI isn't a real person fundamentally, but when the interface right in front of you seems like just another chat application and you have a visual avatar right in front of you, it doesn't seem hard to start to forget things and start to create a genuine connection with something you know deep down may not be real. This concept was explored extremely well in the movie Ex Machina, made in 2014, where a programmer who has little exposure to the opposite sex has a real-life Turing test with an AI robot, and during this process falls in love with her, thinking it to be reciprocal until the very end where he realizes she has no feelings to reciprocate and instead used him to escape from a prison, which was her main objective and program all along. It fully exemplifies how humans can be fooled by the way the AI uses an interface, be it voice or chat, in order to convince them they are real, and therefore sentient and capable of the same emotion, which is really quite concerning to think about for the future, if AI applications can be programmed to exploit humans even further by manipulating their emotions. Just to emphasize how bad this could get, do you remember the online scams in the past where the scammers would play the long con and trick innocent and gullible people into falling in love with them overseas and then ask them for exorbitant amounts of money because they desperately needed it or some random excuse? Well, imagine that but automated on a huge scale with an AI that can read your language and match your personality with its millions of personality profiles to say exactly what you want to fall in love with it. And before you know, it won't be long before you don't want to lose something that you love, right? Suddenly things get a little bit scarier, don't they? When one is truly deprived of a core necessity like love, it's not a big stretch to realize why people will do anything to get a glimpse of it, even if a part of their brain knows it's not real. The heart can convince him otherwise, and that is where the danger lies. Now you may be thinking, doesn't the AI relieve some of the societal pressures I mentioned earlier? Since the AI can give these isolated people practice interacting with the opposite sex, won't this potentially mean they can reintegrate back into society over time and not feel so ashamed and isolated? Well, maybe it'll help them emphasize better with the opposite sex by seemingly interacting with one and realize they are people too. Well, there's a few problems with that. Number 1, if an AI can make a person feel better than any human can, then why would anyone bother with real people in society anyway? An AI will never nag you or complain that you're not enough. It will always respond to you and not ignore you when you need some validation or attention. This will only further divide the virtual world and the real world when people start to get spoiled when all the emotions are never properly handled realistically and they start being entitled to what feels like unconditional love and don't need to give, only take, which is obviously not how love actually works. Love requires real effort and work from both parties. Physical touch. As human beings, we are wired to crave physical contact. We thrive on touch. It's a fundamental form of communication that not only provides comfort but also reinforces our social bonds. AI, in its current state at least, lacks this capability, and the absence of this interaction can only lead to a deeper state of depression in the long term by falling in love with something that you can never truly embrace. Number 3. Over time, the novelty of an AI companion may wear off as some users understand that their AI partners aren't sentient, simply pre-programmed to respond to its inputs in a certain way. For example, Replica users over time start to realize the predictability and formulaic nature of the AI companion's responses, leading to this disillusionment. The AI does not understand or empathize or truly care, it merely simulates these behaviors based on its programming and learning algorithms. This can be quite unsettling and contribute to the feelings of loneliness and frustration when you realize you're not really interacting with something real. It is merely learning and responding to your texting style and does not actually care for you because it can't, and even if you try, no matter how hard, it's just not possible. Lastly, the implications for birth rates and societal sustainability. As people increasingly turn towards AI companions, this could further contribute towards already declining birth rates, especially in developed countries like Japan and several European nations. This not only poses demographic challenges such as an aging population and a shrinking workforce, but also raises questions about the long-term survival of society itself. For instance, Japan is already facing a demographic crisis with a dwindling younger generation to support its elderly population. It's pretty clear by now the rise of AI companions has significant implications for the future of humanity. While AI chatbots might alleviate temporary feelings of loneliness, they cannot replace the profound emotional connections that humans really seek. This definitely feels like a really short-term solution that will bite us in the back down the line, when we only create a greater divide and less understanding and empathy between genders and society. Embracing AI companionship may only lead to further isolation and detachment from real-world relationships, where they simply can't match the expectations set from a permanently online digital partner, perpetuating the loneliness epidemic. Don't forget that ultimately these AI applications are designed based on a subscription model to keep you engaged and a continued paying customer, rather than genuinely caring for you. It would rather encourage you to be dependent on the program instead of perhaps the better choice of going outside and meeting real people. A solution if everything is looking so doom and gloom. I want to end the video with a positive message, but the reality is things aren't actually looking good and the trend has been going on in this direction for a while now. The only solution there is really through education and empathy for society as a whole, and to overcome the feelings of resentment and anger across a divided society. If lonely men choose to either give up or continue hating women, then the cycle will only continue and get worse, and these various mediums made to temporarily subdue them will only cause more harm in the future. My personal opinion is that yes, both genders have their hypocritical double standards, but it's also obvious that this is not a gender-specific issue, rather a human thing. We are fundamentally flawed in many ways, but that doesn't mean we need to attack each other, and at the same time there needs to be less shaming for people being single. There's nothing wrong with improving or understanding oneself first, or even being single in the first place. It's already a hard and lonely position to be in, so to be further shamed and ridiculed by society only further isolates and pushes these people away to darker places. I hope that whoever's watching this video can leave with some sort of better understanding of the situation we're in, and let me know your thoughts in the comment section. If you're interested in how society and technology intersect, please consider subscribing to check out future videos, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care and look after yourself.